Vuyo Makhuvha is the head of strategy and growth at August Robotics, a role that enables her to live out her mission of building products that help the world maximize utility. In her role, she is charged with shaping August Robotics' portfolio of mobile robots, ensuring that the products they develop improve the process of business across industries. In her previous life, she was a consultant at McKinsey, in a role that gave her the opportunity to, I got to delete this little pop-up so I can read the words. To work in Europe, Africa, and Asia. She's an Alan Gray Orbis Fellow and holds a master's degree in mathematical finance and a bachelor's degree in actuarial science from the University of Cape Town. And I think August, I think you're in Hong Kong, and I think it's like 10 p.m. Yeah, so big round of applause on it. Thank you for Vuyo for staying up so late for us. And I will stop screen sharing and give you the power to screen share, and then you can go.
First of all, thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As you know, my name is Vuyo Makhuvha. I'm the head of strategy and growth at August Robotics. I do have a little bit of a different profile. As you can see, I'm not an engineer. Probably the closest I've gotten to engineering is financial engineering, which is totally different. And everything I've learned about robotics, I've learned through doing. So through implementing our robots at our client sites, talking to potential clients, validating use cases to try and develop new products. And so I'm going to come a bit from that angle. It might be a bit different, but I hope you'll enjoy and enjoy the ride with me. To start off with, I think I'll just give a bit of an introduction to August Robotics and an introduction to one of our robots, Lionel, just because I reference it a bit later in the talk. And then I'll kind of set the intention and then take it from there. I think we're going to do questions at the end, but if there's something that's really pressing that you want to talk about and bring up, that would be great. I'm totally cool with having more of a conversation type thing than a whole presentation. So yeah, feel free to jump in if you feel there's something you really, really want to discuss and you can't wait till the end. I totally don't mind. So at August Robotics, our mission is to automate dirty, dangerous, and dull tasks globally. We believe in building robots across industries. So you can see we have an exhibition robot. We look into construction, infrastructure. We're really open in terms of the industry that we'd like to provide value in. It's really about building user-friendly, specialized autonomous robots that are designed specifically for our clients and easily integrated into their processes. In line with that, we kind of have a philosophy of building hardware and software timelines. We engage our clients early and constantly capture feedback, and we try to provide an affordable model for our clients. And I'm really kind of in my role involved in those two things at the end, right? I am in the fortunate position that I get to think of the robots that we should make and validate the user use case and talk to potential clients before we even build the robot. I get to see us go through the process of development. And then I'm fortunate enough to be able to go to the client site and be with the clients when they use the robots for the first time and engage with them and find ways we can improve what we've built for them. So I feel really fortunate to be able to really go through that process. Our first robot's name is Lionel. Lionel works primarily in the exhibition industry doing floor marking. I'm not sure what you know about the exhibition industry, but a very critical first step is to put all the marks for that trade show on the floor. Now, these marks are things like booth corners, rigging points, sanitation points, electrical points, their descriptions, and all of these marks need to be accurately placed within about 3/16 of an inch. And so what that means is that in order to be able to serve our clients, we have to use our proprietary localization system so that Lionel can work in these huge, huge halls and be able to understand its position with the level of accuracy required. Traditionally, how this is done is there'll be like 10 to 15 men on a floor with like printed out CAD plans and a tape measure, and they'll be marking out each of these 1,000 points by hand. And so being able to automate that like increases the efficiency of that process in a way that also kind of minimizes the impact on people's bodies. So this is Lionel, and I really just wanted to give a brief introduction because I do reference it later on. So my intention today maybe is a bit different. It's really to give a different view or an approach to thinking about robotics and reduce the iterations to achieve successful adoption of robotics. I like to think of this as giving additional considerations for prioritization. We are fortunate to be in an industry or in a world where there's so much impact we can have. There's so many use cases, so many opportunities to provide value through robotics. And I'm sure for many of us also trying to decide what to focus on, what challenges to take on, can be a bit tricky at times. And so I hope in this talk I kind of find a way to add more layers to help make that prioritization process easier. And it's also just a way to give an insight into a different stakeholders' considerations when looking at robotics. So I've titled this talk, Finding the Sweet Spot. And it's really just about developing impactful robots. And by doing that, accelerating the adoption of robotics across industries and across the world. The diagram on the right is a bit simplified, but I think it is a way for me to kind of communicate how I think about it. If I think about the fact that there's these millions and millions of use cases that we can tackle, each with their own different challenges and their own different technical considerations, I think kind of like making those technical considerations, whether it be what do we already have the capabilities to achieve, or what are the use cases where the capabilities we need are within our reach, within a certain time frame, whatever that may be from your position, and then using that to kind of narrow down the use cases that we'd like to consider. And then adding these other layers of considerations, being value considerations, process considerations, and people considerations, which isn't a great term, but it's the best term I could think of. And once we kind of go through that, we hit this, I'd say, sweet spot, these robots where we can have a lot of impact on the users and improve their lives in a sufficient amount, and that are kind of ripe for adoption. The reason I say this is quite simplified is because it's never really that straight line, right? There's a lot of iteration and a lot of back and forth. So you can get to a point where you've kind of narrowed things out from a technical perspective, given your own technical considerations. You get to a point where you think you found something that is impactful from a value perspective, and then you get to the process considerations and you get a bit stuck. And often then you go back one step or back two steps and say, okay, well, I'm stuck here from a process considerations aspect. Is there a technical fix? Should I rethink of what the value I'm bringing is? And so it's a bit more iterative than this, but I will take you through kind of each of the things, how I think about them, and try to give some examples where I can. Once I've gone through each of these considerations, then I'll kind of apply it to a use case that I just chose, and to just kind of show how I think about it. So defining value. I really think of it as, what is the one clear value proposition you are delivering? Now, I know often you touch on many value propositions, right? It could be increasing efficiency, automating undesirable tasks, achieving a level of precision or uniformity that you can't achieve using manual processes, increasing worker safety. The list goes on in terms of what impact we're able to make using the technology that we're creating. But I really kind of urge us to think of what is the anchor value proposition. What is the one thing, even though there might be others, that we really believe we're bringing to our clients when we're developing these robots. And the reason why I think of that is because at the end of the day, we want the tech that we develop, or the research and the insights that we're able to get to be used, to be impactful, to do something in the world. And so really, before we even decide to take on a challenge, let's define what we think we're going to achieve from a value perspective, just beyond from what is the technical milestone we're going to reach. And then kind of once you've kind of discovered what that value is that how does that solution fit in and what does it impact? So if the green part is what you're automating, the part of the process that you're automating, how does the solution that you created impact the process before? How does it impact the part of the process afterwards? Some examples could be like, what level of setup does it require? Does it need new capabilities? Does it add time to another process? Because in order for this to work, you need to add a new process in between, kind of as a setup process. And why this is important is because this kind of becomes interlinked with the value that you're able to give your users. For instance, if you're trying to increase efficiency, and the product that you're developing is able to kind of decrease the time taken from the process by 10 minutes. But the setup that you require is 20 minutes, then net, you kind of get to a point where you're adding 10 minutes to the process. So if you go back and you evaluate that value that you defined, which is increasing efficiency, then you find yourself stuck. And there's probably some technical considerations you can make. There may be new technical requirements or new things that you do to ensure that doesn't happen. Or it might mean that you need to reevaluate whether this is the right solution. Alternatively, if you're in the same case, but the value you're trying to achieve is to increase worker safety, then maybe adding 10 minutes to the process is something necessary or is worth it because of the lives you could save or the injuries you could reduce. And so process and value become really kind of intertwined sometimes, because there's some things that you're willing to give and take based on what you're trying to optimize for. Similarly, if you create a solution that requires specialized capabilities, is this something that the user can take on? Can the user learn whatever the user needs to learn to be able to implement these successfully? Or would you get to a case where you have a great product, a great robot, a great solution, but because the capabilities required can't be transferred, or they don't want to hire an engineer to be able to add those capabilities to those team. And so kind of the solution you've created, although impactful in theory, cannot be impactful in practice. So kind of that would be for me, the next step is once you've defined that value, making sure that the process makes sense. The last thing is kind of looking beyond the spreadsheet. And that's why I said people considerations is a bit difficult, but I just couldn't find a word that really encapsulates this in a way that I felt was right. And these can be things that are like preferences or unions or preconceptions about robotics. We work in a B2B environment. And so one would say, okay, as long as the spreadsheet makes sense and as long as the process diagram makes sense and operationally it makes sense, then it should all be good. But at the end of the day, we're usually still working with people. And so these things might come up and might be challenges. And if we can already think about them before we decide to take on a technical challenge or technological challenge, it's really kind of helpful and can help you prioritize what to do next. I believe that these kind of people factors are factors that should fall away if you're providing enough value in the right way. But I wouldn't recommend just assuming that with everything. You would hope that that's true, right? If people see value and if they can make it work, then they should get over some of the kind of less quantifiable factors. But that's not always the case. And so the reason that I've kind of gone through this process or this theory is to really, hopefully, when you have a few challenges that you want to work on or a few ideas that you want to implement, help you kind of have a different view or a different set of metrics to compare against and prioritize. At the end of the day, I think we all want to be doing the highest value work and making the highest value impact. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And I just want to add, I mean, of course, this is not exhaustive. I'm sure there are tons of other factors to think of, but these are some of the factors that I've seen come up the most in the work that we've done. So I just decided to choose a random use case, and I chose construction because I think the robotics industry loves construction for valid reasons, right? There are tons of processes. The level of automation, digitization, and I guess modernization in the construction industry is not what you would expect in 2022. The average age of a construction worker is increasing, and productivity hasn't really increased in the last 50 to 100 years. So it's always kind of a really interesting industry to look at. And I've chosen painting because it's kind of a process that I think most of us will believe is something that we can tackle from a robotics perspective. We've seen this done in factories, whether it be in car manufacturing or other kind of manufacturing processes. And the other probably major capability we need is to be able to understand the environment in terms of what the room looks like, and navigate in that environment. Something we've also kind of overcome as a community. And so it kind of combines the two major capabilities you need are capabilities that we see around us all the time. And so I'm going to really apply kind of that framework to it and kind of show how things might turn up and how you'd have to reconsider some things. So defining the value, what would be the value of having a painting robot in a construction site? I guess you could say increasing efficiency, increasing quality, increasing worker health or reducing injury. I'm going to go with increasing efficiency as the anchor value that we're trying to solve for and see how we go. And so analyzing the process would be to kind of take a look at the whole painting process from walking into an unpainted room all the way to a completely painted room. I'm not going to show the whole video. I'm going to go to where they paint just for us to look at that process. Somewhere here, I think. And I mean, when you look at it, it seems pretty kind of standard, quite easy, as long as you're moving all the time and you pressing down on the spray gun within the right amount of pressure. It's quite an easy process to, I think, automate. If you look at the speed there, the person doing it can already go quite fast. So the question can be, okay, how much faster can our solution be, our robot be? Can it be that much faster? I would guess maybe max you could do is maybe 50, decrease the time taken by maybe 50%. And so that's part of analyzing the process would be then to map it out, right? And look at how much time is spent on each part of the process. So from setup and takedown, surface preparation, masking and sheeting and painting. This is the kind of, these numbers aren't exactly correct, but the messaging behind them is. So when you talk to painters and you ask them about painting and you ask them how long it takes, most of the time they'll say it depends, which is what happens most of the time when you're trying to figure out an industry. But after asking them quite a lot of questions, you get to a point where you realize that painting isn't actually that much of the process. It's actually super quick. You can paint a decent sized room in like 5 minutes. And so a lot of the time goes in the preparation, whether it be the surface preparation or the masking and sheeting. Of course, different situations will be different. So if you're kind of painting a factory where it doesn't really matter and it's newly built, then maybe painting is closer to 60%. But in general, this is kind of the split if you talk to painters of the distribution of tasks. So if we take the fact that painting is in this case only 15% and that spray painting is actually pretty fast, and that maybe let's say we can improve it by 50%, so we can take 7.5% of the time out. You ask yourself, okay, is this the highest value? Is this the highest impact I can make on this process? Because there's much higher value. There are other parts of the process that take much more of the time, right? The 35 to 40% of surface preparation, or the 25% to masking and sheeting. Do I think that this is where I should be looking? But let's assume that we still believe that painting is where we should be automating, and say, okay, we can reduce the amount of time taken by 50%. So we can reduce the amount of time the impact we can make on this process is about take out 7.5% of the time. Great. But then let's think about, how does our solution need to work in that environment? When we do put the robot into the room, there surely has to be some kind of understanding of the environment, whether it's, I don't know, you walk around with the LiDAR and capture the room that way, or you have a plan of the room and you want to calibrate the robot to that plan in the environment, whatever that may be, that way of setting up or getting comfortable in the environment. That takes time. So now maybe that 7.5% of time that we think we can reduce only goes to 6% or 5% because of that extra time we're adding to that process, that preparation. And so, okay, now we're at 5 to 6%, let's say. I'm just making this up. But then the more we analyze the process and we understand the people considerations, we find out that painting is the best part of the process for the people doing the job. So they go through that surface preparation and that masking and sheeting, and that kind of the reward for that grueling work of filling in holes, sanding the surface, pulling out all that masking and sheeting and doing all of that work. It's kind of the reward at the end of that is being able to do the painting. So we might be able to reduce the time taken to do this process by 5 to 6%. Is this enough to get someone to move to change their processes? I don't know. And that 5 to 6% that we could be saving is the part that they like most of that job. Okay. How do you consider that? And given those facts, is that the process that you really want to go and automate? It's kind of just a way to think about making decisions about what to work on and what to prioritize, and what to do first. So yeah, that's me. I think I went a bit too fast, but that's kind of what I wanted to share and talk about today. If you want to continue the conversation on a different forum, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.